KennEdwards20201001.tv. It is a program airing on October 1st, a Thursday night. We have our bumper rolling. We have a studio ready. We have our guest ready for the pre-recorded special edition, PJNet.tv. And I am Coach Prasick, your host, and it is great to be here by way of recording. And before we get started, Ken Edwards is our upcoming guest, and I want to publicly acknowledge his graciousness for making time in his schedule to pre-record this so that I could be traveling at the time you're watching this. So Ken Edwards is standing by in our studio, and he is I've paid my debts to you, Ken. You don't owe me anything. But a lot of people do owe other people things.
Yes, that is a real common issue with all of us. Debt is something that we all deal with. And if we're not careful, we'll find the slippery slope of debt will get us in trouble, deep trouble fast. And it's harder to get out than it is to get into debt. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the debt snowball and the importance of having a emergency cash reserve so you don't have to run to the credit card every single time that you have an emergency expense. And that'll help you to get out of debt to where you can have freedom to be able to live and to enjoy life and to serve God and to be able to go and do and give all for the glory of God.
To what extent, Ken, and I haven't even heard what you're about to say, but suppose that you are buried in debt, okay, and just almost every penny you've got is being allocated to retiring that credit card, debt. But yet, let me guess, I'm going to hear you say, set aside some money for pay yourself first, and it's like, well, who am I not going to pay?
Yeah, that is a real problem. If you are a slave to the minimum payment on all of your credit cards every month and all of your other revolving charge accounts, what happens is you have no excess at all, and every single penny goes towards just staying afloat from that debt. So tonight we're going to talk about the debt snowball, but really to answer your question, a couple of the things that will help will be to try to earn extra income. Mm-hmm. If you're able to work, overtime at your current job, maybe to work some side jobs or possibly pick up a secondary job someplace just to have a little extra money, not just to go blow on yourself, mm-hmm. but to build some emergency cash reserve so that if the garbage disposal goes out and you have a $250 repair bill because the repairman comes out and says you have a new garbage disposal, you don't immediately have to run to the credit card. Mm-hmm. So what you find, it's a revolving problem. It's a revolving door. If you don't have a cash reserve, you have no choice but to go to the credit card. If the credit card is full, you can't get a decent credit card interest rate because you're maxed out in your credit cards. And so one thing leads to another, and it's a constant downward slide, the slippery slope of debt. And a couple of months ago when we were on, we talked a little bit about debt, and I mentioned the debt snowball, and I made a note that night. I've been carrying it, in my calendar to remind myself that when we get together to talk about the debt snowball. And this week I recorded a podcast of a young lady that was in her early 20s who her husband walked out. She was left with $30,000 of debt, part-time job, 2 children, and a single mom. And she had a miraculous story how in 5 years she paid off that debt because of the debt snowball and because of some good financial counseling from some people at her church. And it reminded me that we needed to talk about this because it is so important. And when I met her a few weeks ago and I heard about her story and the testimony of her paying off $30,000 debt in 5 years, I said, wow, we got to share this because it gives hope to some other people that are in the same boat. And so The first thing you need to do if you're deep, deep, deep in debt is find a way to make a little extra money and begin to build at least a little teeny tiny emergency fund. Even if it's $250 or $500, something so that if you have a flat tire in your car or the garbage disposal goes out or you have some unexpected bill that you immediately don't have to run to the credit card. So the first thing you really want to do is pay yourself. You mentioned that a minute ago. You want to put some money aside for those emergencies. Every single one of us needs that. As we get older in life, a little more mature, as we have a little more financial resolve or a little higher paying job and a little lower house payment compared to what we did when we were young, it's a little easier to establish. But for most families, it's almost impossible to follow the suggested of 6 to 9 months of emergency cash.
That would be called retirement.
Yeah. But if you get into a COVID-19 and are laid off for 3 months, if you have 6 months of emergency cash reserve, you can deal with it. You can handle it. You can survive. So anything in life, in business, in any type of finances, you want to be able to have some margin so that if some downturn takes place or an emergency happens, that you've got some emergency reserves that you can continue to pay your bills or continue operating your company until you're able to recruit, to the economy comes back or whatever is causing the issue. So once you get some type of emergency, at least a little bit, then you need to tackle the debt. So the way the debt snowball works, let's say for simplicity's sake, you have 5 revolving credit cards or 5 revolving accounts. And all of them you pay $100 a month, and you're barely able to make the $100 a month, work. So the way the debt snowball is, you take a look and you start with the one with the lowest minimum due. Because at $100 a month or whatever extra you're able to put into it, you want to knock that lowest balance first. So that if you can knock that balance out, then you can take that $100 and apply it to the next lowest balance. And now you're putting $200 a month towards that next debt. That's where the snowball effect comes in. Now you may have to work an extra job. You may have to do some overtime. You may have to find other ways to get some kind of extra income. But what happens is once you get that first 2 paid off, now on that third one, because I'm just doing $100 a month per payment, now you got $300 a month and you're being able to pay that off 3 times as fast. And that's the concept of working the debt snowball to reduce the debt. Now, in some cases, everybody has high credit card and they're all 18, 19% interest. In those cases, then what you want to do is you want to look at which one has the highest interest if they're same identical balance due and work on the one that has the highest interest first. But it's going to take some sacrifice and it's going to take some real diligence to be able to tackle that debt. This young lady, this was 15 years ago when this happened, took her 5 years to pay off that debt. Now she's owned a house, she started a business, and her life is totally changed because she was able to manage that debt and get it under control. She did, her ex had a truck, and she was able to, unfortunately, the loan was in her name, so she was stuck with it. But she was able to get rid of that truck and reduce the debt. But she still had another car payment. She had some revolving cards and other things that she had to slowly work on. She increased her hours to where she was finally working full time. She moved her 2 boys into a teeny tiny apartment that they could just barely afford. And she worked hard to get that debt. And she said once she got the first $1,000 paid off that first debt, she said it was like a jubilation because now she saw the victory that she got one of those debts
Right.
taken care of, and she was able then to apply that money to the next debt. Not go out and just blow it and charge up a whole bunch more, but
Mm-hmm.
really she was dedicated at paying off that debt so that she could live debt free. Now, here's one of the problems with debt. Not all debt is bad. In fact, the Bible discourages from debt. It's not sin, but it discourages because most of the time when you go and you buy a car, and now they want you to finance that car for 72 months. Once you drive that car off the lot, it is worth less than what you paid for it. If you turned around 3 months later and sold that car, you would still owe money on that car payment, even though you have a fairly new car. So any type of a payment where the value depreciates, drops in value, it's a no-win situation. Now, yes, there are probably times when we need car payments, but it's not the ideal situation. So your best bet is to take and drive a little old chunker, and save a little bit of money so that you either have a huge down payment or even better than that, pay cash on a newer car and keep paying yourself, putting that money away in a car fund so that eventually you'd be able to take and buy a newer car with a huge down payment and a very, very low monthly payment. Otherwise, it'll just catch up to you and you'll be on that slippery slope of debt.
Well, life happens. Ken, and you said if you sold the car, you'd still have payments. Actually, you wouldn't be able to sell the car because you couldn't
Probably.
produce the title. You'd have to
That's
pay
right.
off the car. The other thing is, what if you got involved in an accident and the car was totaled? The insurance company is going to pay you the value of the car at the time it was totaled, and
Yep.
all of a sudden you don't have a car
Yep.
and you
Yeah.
don't have enough money to pay off. That's a bad situation. Ken, before time slips away from us, and I don't know if you were going to touch on this, but I wanted to bring up two things you haven't brought up yet.
Okay.
Two things. Thrift is number one. There is no tax on thrift. If, believe it or not, there are people out there living without cell phones or without cable TV or something. And I call this throwing things overboard to keep the ship afloat. The nice thing about thrift, Ken, if you save $100, that's like making 130.
It is.
It is.
It really is. And
Literally.
bartering, yeah, there's many ways that you can trade goods and barter and do things that never hits the economic system. That is still totally, legal, and you just it's ways to be able to work around the system and save and not have to subject yourself to all the taxes.
The other thing that came to my mind is, in addition to thrift, is basically reducing your lifestyle and literally throw things overboard. Okay, have a garage sale, get rid of the junk, create some cash. But if you learn to live on rice and beans, okay, make that sacrifice, but get some cash, because what you're describing, when as you were calling it the debt snowball, I'm thinking winning the war of attrition. Once you get that first one paid off, you've attrited that debt, and it's very freeing. So, in addition to trying to earn more money by working in more jobs, that's a good idea. But you can literally throw stuff overboard, sell things, and barter, as you suggested, legally. Exchange for goods and services that you would normally pay cash for.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing how much stuff that you accumulate over time. And we always think we had to have the newest and the fanciest. But you and I were talking before we started the program tonight about driving old cars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the best way to, if you buy a car, is buy a decent car and then drive it literally until the wheels fall off.
And then drive it another year.
That's right. I remember a fellow once. He had an old Toyota Camry. I used to work with him, and I mean, this thing was like 20 years old. And I said to him one day, I said, Doug, I said, why don't you get yourself a newer car? He said, well, this one just keeps going and running and running. And he said, I'll get a repair now and then. And I'll think, well, I'm going to put $500 in there. That's just
Got it. Mm-hmm.
a one or two car payments. And he said, I can drive it for another 4 or 5 months just with one car payment. So he said, I just keep it going.
Well, that's similar to my Nissan truck. I've got a 94 Nissan truck with over 200,000. It's about 260 now. But I remember at about 200,000, it needed a clutch, and that clutch was $750. Well, that's more than the truck was worth. But you had no choice, right? Once you invest that $750, well, now you got to keep it.
You got to.
You just invested $750 in it.
Yeah.
And I've had people offer to buy that truck from me for $2,500, but I've had to decline it, saying, well, what would I do with a $2,500?
Mm-hmm.
You know how much it costs me to insure that vehicle?
$12
a month.
$12 a month.
$12 a month.
Yeah.
I mean,
so, that is a cheap ride. And if you don't have to make long distance drives across country, and if you do want something fancier for a trip, say to someplace away for a holiday, you could always rent a car.
Rent one.
And that way, then you don't have to worry about driving the old clunker, 1,000 miles when you go off to vacation someplace. So there are many ways that you can economize. And what happens in life is when we get married, when we're young, we want to have it just as much and everything that mom and dad had. And so we'll go out and we'll buy furniture and we'll get a payment. We'll go out and we'll get a nicer car. Then we get a little child, so we're going to have a minivan. All these things that add up. And it's amazing today when I look at the families and their strollers and their little devices to handle all the children and pull them behind the bicycles and things. And I think, wow, when we had little children, we could never afford all of those things. They didn't even sell such a critter. Mm-hmm. And so we could get by with a lot less. Mm-hmm. We have just programmed ourselves that we've got to have all of these items to make us feel like we're successful and accomplishing everything. But if we would sacrifice a little when we're young, it's amazing how that little will affect our long-term financial future as we look at the time value of money. Saving a little bit when you're young will make a huge difference when you're old.
Well, a lot of good that does me. I'm old.
And maybe I could say I'm right behind you, Coach, or maybe I'm saying I'm out there ahead of you.
Well, and it's funny, by the time you figure these out, it's too late. And, and it's funny because along the way, we have heard words like this when we were younger, and we thought, well, I'll do that starting next year, and next thing you know, you wake up and think, oh, I'm over 40. Oh, I'm over 50. Yeah. Oh, but I think that there are, and I appreciate you sharing, Ken, because so many people, they silently suffer, and they're being hounded by debt collectors and things like that. Now, in the closing minutes, is there any advice you would have if you have debt collectors hounding? How do you handle that? Do you not answer the call? Do you lie to them? What do you do?
Well, I'm not a debt counselor, so I do not have all of the correct. There are actually some people. There's a guy on the radio here on Saturday mornings, and he really goes into all the things that debt collectors can do and can't do. But the main thing you want to do is try to work out something with the people you owe the money to, make it realistic, and then stick to your word. Mm-hmm. Being a person of your word will go a long ways with a lot of your creditors. Well,
but you can also be proactive.
That's right.
Don't wait for them to call you.
That's right.
These are tough pills to swallow, but it's actually better. Most creditors are willing to work with you as long, what you said earlier, can they count on you?
Yeah.
Once you make a promise, keep it. And they would much rather have, $20 a month for the next 10 years than to have a promise of $500 next month. And
one of the things that creeps up on people really quick are hospital bills. And hospital bills are almost, they seem in some ways almost unjustified. They're so expensive. And if you don't have insurance, and even if you do have insurance, it could still leave you with a big chunk of that's due. And most hospital bills, if you just pay $50 a month, and just be a person of your word and integrity, they'll give you some breathing room. They'll give you some space. They'll work with you. It's just when you try to ignore them,
Ignore it.
or
They
you
assume the worst.
That's right. And so, but try to work a way out. And if you have to, find a debt counselor. But there are rules and regulations. There's our laws that they can't hassle you. And if they do hassle you too much and say the wrong things, then you can actually use that against them and in court and get relief from some of that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, but it is the type of a thing that, from a Christian standpoint, we need to be men and women that honor God with our finances. And if we have a debt, we shouldn't be looking for bankruptcy just to get out. We shouldn't look for the easy way out. There may be a time and a place, but we need to be men and women of integrity and to pay and be responsible for that debt. One of these sessions, Coach, I'll have to tell you about a back debt that I had when I had a business failure, and I know you've had some challenges yourself with the business dealings in the past, and it is a real tough decision what to do, but the Lord honored our faithfulness to give and work the situation out miraculously so that we could continue on in ministry and to the glory of God.
I look forward to that, Ken, and that's about what I'm going to have to do. Our time is out. Wrap it up. Tell us any parting words, and we look forward to hearing from you next time around. But it's still daylight out there where you're at.
Yeah, it is. It's time to have some supper almost.
Well, I've already had mine. I'm thinking bed.
Oh, Coach, you stay up to 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning working on
I do, but not
videos.
tonight, because I have a date with my wife tomorrow to take her to work early so that I can do some car repairs while she's at work, and it's going to be a crazy week. But Ken, I appreciate you. Every month, it's the fourth Thursday. No, the first Thursday.
First Thursday, yes.
First Thursday of every month, Ken shares with us and always has some wisdom in a financial way. Not just financial wisdom, but spiritual wisdom to go along with it. Because one, with having all the financial wisdom in the world, well, that's only in the world.
That's right.
Ken, we appreciate you sharing and look forward to seeing you next month about this time.
All right. God bless.
All right, folks, that was Ken Edwards, and he appears right here on pjnet.tv Thursday, as you just heard. Folks, the fun is only beginning. We've got another program at the bottom of the hour. That's just a few minutes from now. J.D. Winninger will be joining us to take us on a tour around the Cross W Ranch. Until that time, I'd like to ask 2 questions of you, not to answer me, but to answer yourself. First, what is the boldest thing you've ever done for Jesus Christ? Now, we just talked about resolving financial struggles, and it's going to take some courage. You're going to have to make some hard decisions. The second question is, well, when was that? I hope you'll consider accepting the challenge to never allow yourself to be satisfied with either answer.